some years ago, I was in the Boys Brigade, and one of the highlights of our yearly calendar was the Summer Sports Day. We used to love the Summer Sports Day in my group. We used to really particularly enjoy the tug of war. And the tug of war on this particular sports field took place over quite a big ditch. It was full of mud in the bottom, and the losing team would always end up in the ditch, caked in mud. And we used to always look forward to the tug of war. I can't ever remember a year when we didn't win the competition. And it wasn't that we were particularly good at the tug of war, it was more that we had a secret weapon. And the secret weapon's name was Derek. Derek was our anchor man. He was at the end of the rope, and he would wrap the rope around him. And then when the call went out to take up the strain, Derek would lean back on the rope, and you could feel the rope tighten under the strain. And then you could almost hear the rope creak under the strength that Derek was bringing. And he would toy with the team opposite. He would just hold them there. They would put in all their efforts into it, but they were not moving anywhere. And then Derek would suddenly shout, "Pull!" And we would all pull together, and our opponents would always end up ditched. I believe that Derek could have won the competition on his own, really. He didn't really need our help, but he graciously enabled us to share in the winning team, to share in the success. Friends, in our world, we are called to take up the strain so often. Our world measures and rates and judges everything we do. Think about social media. You cannot send a message without it being liked or not liked. You cannot express an opinion today without being told that you're out of touch, out of date, out of line, out of order. No wonder so many people are suffering with anxiety. The burdens of modern life are heaping up on each of us, ready to cause us to just collapse in a heap of resignation. The Pharisees in Jesus' day were the ones who added burdens to everyday people. Pharisees kept adding to the religious rules and regulations, heaping up burdens, but not giving or providing the means of bearing those burdens or of easing the load. People were always left to feel that they were not good enough. Maybe that's happening to you. Maybe you're burdened at the moment by your boss at work, who is demanding that you take more and more work home to do in the evening when you're simply trying to create some family time. Or maybe it's a demanding marriage partner who's expecting simply too much from you. Or maybe it's an elderly parent who expects you to be around whenever they call. It could even be the bills and the mortgage that seem to come around with increasing demands every single month. Or the mind games from the bully who burdens your every thought with fear. Or maybe it's that you're waiting for hospital results, fearful of the pain that they may predict. Friends, the Pharisees were often not happy with God even. I remember the story of a man and his young son who were on a journey. And they decided, as it was a long journey, they were going to take their donkey with them. The father lifted the son onto the donkey, and they walked along, or the father walked along, the son rode on the donkey, and they came across a group of people who, as they went past them, they made the comment, "Look at that, fancy that son sitting on that donkey and making his elderly father walk." With that, the son said to his dad, "Dad, I'll get off the donkey and walk, and you can ride on the donkey." So that's what they did. And as they walked along another mile, they came across another group of people. And this group of people said, "Look at that father. sitting on the donkey while he's making his son walk. Isn't that a terrible way of being a parent? Hearing this, the father decided that it would be better if they both sat on the donkey. So he lifted the son up with him, and they went on the next mile of their journey, and they came across another group of people. And this group of people looked at the father and son on the donkey, and they said, "Look at that. That's cruelty to animals, that is, both of them riding on that donkey." So they both got off the donkey, and they did the next mile by walking alongside, both of them walking alongside the donkey. And they came across another group of people who simply said, "What's the point in having a donkey if nobody's going to ride it?" And with that, the father and the son picked up the donkey, and they carried it on the rest of the journey. Sometimes, friends, there is no keeping people happy. And that was true for the Pharisees. When John the Baptist came in God's name, he preached about judgment and the need for people to turn back to God. And the Pharisees accused him of being demon possessed. And then Jesus comes along with a positive message of hope and release from captivity. And the Pharisees accused him of being a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Of course, Satan, our enemy, wants us to keep talking about the unfair, the traumatic, and the corrupt things of this world. He wants us to be talking and focusing on racism and fear of COVID-19, and on broken relationships and slavery and family struggles. How people are weighed down by doubt, traumatic events, uncertainty, money worries, or caring for a loved one. Our enemy wants us to focus on those things. I remember reading about the man who wrote and produced the film The Exorcist. He said this: "As far as God goes, I am a non-believer. But when it comes to the devil, well, that's something else. The devil keeps advertising. The devil does lots of commercials." Satan sees the vulnerability in all of us. If you feel fear or doubt or hesitation and uncertainty, he sees those things in us too. But what would happen if, when the enemy looks at us, he was to see certainty, faith, trust? What if he was to see his old enemy, Jesus, standing at our side, walking with us? As the old Footprints poem says, he carries us in the difficult times. Then the enemy would see an overcomer. And that's what you and I were meant to be. When we trust God, we will only be able to overcome if we stand next to Jesus. You won't be perfect, none of us can be. You and I won't be unaffected by life, but with Jesus' help, we can overcome when we are called to take up the strain. We're seeing lots of protests in the world at the moment, and we pray for the change that is so much needed in our society in order for people to live together. However, there is only one way that people can change, and it's by connecting to God through his Son, Jesus. Romans chapter 5 and verse 1 says this: "Since we have been made right in God's sight by faith, we have peace with God because of what Jesus has done for us." A few hundred years before Jesus was alive, the prophet Zechariah wrote and called God's people to shout in triumph because this new king was on his way. Yet he is not what the people were expecting. This new king would do the right things. He would be victorious in setting us right in our relationship with God. The new king would yoke himself to his people. He would connect with them, walk with them, share the burden, and help them to know that God understands and is gentle and humble. He will be a king who will repay us twice as many blessings in response to our troubles. A double portion of joy awaits all those who have trusted this coming king. And Jesus is that king. And Jesus is the one who provides the way for us to cope when we are burdened. You see, Jesus never predicted that we would have a life free of struggle. Jesus knew what it was to struggle. Remember when he was carrying his cross and he fell under the weight of that burden that he was carrying. So we need to define our personal anxieties. What is it that keeps us awake at night? What is it that is on our mind that wakes us up early every single morning? What is it that persistently distracts us? What makes our chest tighten? We cannot always change that. We cannot always avoid those difficult times. However, we can choose who we go through those times with. Who and what we focus on is within our control. The New Testament says, fix your thoughts on what is true and honourable, right, pure, lovely. Think about things that are admirable, excellent, and worthy of praise. Keep putting into practice all that you've learned and received and seen Jesus doing. Jesus talked about a yoke. The function of a yoke is to help something carry a burden. The word which Jesus uses speaks of a yoke, and in the Greek it means to be well fitted. The yoke was skillfully carved out of wood to measure the animal that was going to wear it, that was going to bear its burden. The chains we wear in life today may be altogether different. Certainly times have moved on from Jesus' day. The burdens we carry are very different, but the answer remains the same. We need to be connected to someone who can help us take up the strain with a yoke that fits perfectly and which connects us to our helper and our guide. A yoke keeps us looking ahead as we walk alongside Jesus. Philippians 3 says this, forget what is behind and strain towards what is ahead. Keep your focus on who is alongside us more than how we are going to come through what is ahead of us. Henri Nouwen tells a lesson about trust that he learned from a family of trapeze artists known as the Flying Rodleys. He visited them and watched them in their act fly through the air with such elegant poise. And when he asked one of the flyers the secret of a trapeze artist, the acrobat gave this reply. The secret, he said, is that the flyer does nothing, but the catcher does everything. When I fly to my catcher, I simply have to stretch out my arms and wait for him to catch me and pull me safely over. The worst thing that the fly can do, he went on, is to try and catch the catcher. I am not supposed to catch them. It's their task to catch me. A flyer must fly and a catcher must catch, but the flyer must trust with outstretched arms that the catcher will be there for him. Friends, Paul signs off one of his letters to the young pastor Timothy, and he says this: I know that Jesus will continue to rescue me from every trip, every trap, every snare, and every pitfall of evil, and that he will carry me safely to his heavenly kingdom. May he be glorified throughout eternity. So yes, there will be times when we are going to be burdened in our lives. However, just as it was good for our tug of war team to know that we had Derek behind us taking up the strain, it is even better knowing that Jesus is yoked to us, especially when our lives mean we have to take up the strain and move forward. Amen.